Are you worried about calcium on the carnivore diet? This is a very common question I get, especially from those who are not including dairy on their carnivore diet. In this video, I'm going to explain why you don't have to be worried about a lack of calcium or weak bones when you follow a carnivore diet, even if you choose to exclude the dairy products. Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Zaldivar, and I was featured on the first ever carnivore diet TV show called Reverse TV series, and I've also lost 35 pounds and maintained it by raising my baseline dopamine levels, as I explain in this YouTube video. I've also quit my nutrition professor jobs at the University of Miami, Miami-Dade College, and the American College of Sports Medicine so I could focus on reaching a wider audience online. Alright, before I go over the calcium-rich foods that you can consume on a carnivore diet, it's important to remember that because you're excluding plant foods on a carnivore diet, you're not exposing your body to plant anti-nutrients like oxalates and phytates, which are so common in vegetables and grains and fruits. And if you're not eating them on a carnivore diet, you will be able to absorb a much greater amount of calcium that you do ingest from your food because the phytates and the oxalates will bind to calcium and prevent their full absorption. So this is similar to just like all the other nutrients. When you're not consuming plant anti-nutrients and you're only consuming animal foods, you're going to absorb the nutrients at a much higher level and in their biologically active form because there's nothing else to interfere with the digestion and absorption of those nutrients. Now, the general recommendation for how much calcium one should consume is around 1,000 milligrams of calcium per day. Bear in mind, this is based off of the population at large, which is mainly consuming a plant-heavy diet with lots of grains, lots of veggies, and fruits. Also, the general recommendation is 1,200 milligrams per day of calcium for postmenopausal women and seniors above the age of 71, both men and women. That's because as we get older, we don't absorb calcium as well, and we lose more calcium from our bones and our bones get weaker as we get older in age. Also, it's a good idea to check your status to see where your bone density is at. The gold standard way to test your bone density is with a DEXA scan. And I also generally recommend for people who want to optimize their health to get a SpectraCell nutrient test because it goes over all the vitamins, all the minerals and nutrients that they might be deficient in. I will post a link to that test if you're just curious or you want to optimize your nutrient status. You can go ahead and just get the test from my storefront. Now, before I go over the list of calcium-rich foods on a carnivore diet, a little note on calcium supplementation. We now have a lot of very high-quality studies that show around 20% increased risk of heart disease when people supplement with calcium, but not when they increase their calcium consumption from the diet as in whole food form. And it might have to do with the way calcium spikes when you do take a supplement, and it's that calcium spike that seems to be correlated with calcification of your blood vessels. So if you're taking 1,000 milligrams in calcium form and you have that spike in calcium, that might really damage your blood vessels as opposed to consuming 1,000 milligrams that is gradually absorbed throughout the day and it never really spikes in that fashion. You're absorbing it in smaller chunks and it comes along with other nutrients that might play a role with it and help it function better in your body. Here are some delicious foods that you can have on a carnivore diet that are especially rich in calcium. I'm gonna go over non-dairy products, but also dairy products that are super rich in calcium. One small can of sardines with the bones has a little bit more calcium than a cup of milk with 325 milligrams of calcium. Canned salmon with the bones in, only 3 ounces of that is gonna give you 180 milligrams of calcium. Just 1 ounce of Parmesan cheese has 330 milligrams of calcium. That's way more than 300 milligrams of calcium found in a cup of milk. 1 ounce of cheddar cheese has 200 milligrams of calcium. Just half a teaspoon of eggshell powder has 400 to 500 milligrams of calcium. That's around 2 cups of milk. And we already mentioned 1 cup of whole milk is going to give you 275 to 300 milligrams of calcium. Similarly, 1 cup of yogurt that's plain and whole milk is going to give you 275 to 300 milligrams of calcium. 1 ounce of goat cheese has 85 milligrams of calcium. And then 1 ounce of bone marrow has a little less than 10 milligrams of calcium. And 3 ounces of beef liver has around 10 milligrams of calcium. So while I'm not convinced that you need the full 1,000 milligrams of calcium if you're following a carnivore diet, since you're not eating the phytates and the oxalates, if you still want to be on the safe side, you want to consume 1,000 milligrams of calcium per day, and you don't want to do it by consuming dairy products, then this is how you can get there. Now, if you don't want to consume dairy on a carnivore diet, you may want to supplement with some eggshell powder, and then you can do lots of sardines and eggshell powder, or a mix between a sardine can and a salmon with bone-in can and some eggshell powder, and you're at 1,000 milligrams per day. If you do consume dairy, it is ridiculously easy to get there. So you can have 1 cup of yogurt with 1 ounce of cheddar cheese and 3 ounces salmon with the bones in, and you're also at your 1,000 milligram goal for the day. Also, the yogurt, the sardines, and the salmon will give you the probiotics that you can get from the yogurt, especially if it's a good quality brand, and it's gonna give you the omega-3s and the iodine that are a little bit harder to get by on a carnivore diet. I have other YouTube videos that teach you how you can up your intake of omega-3s and iodine on a carnivore diet. Until we have longer term studies on a carnivore diet, I generally would recommend to stay on the safe side and ensure that we're consuming some iodine and omega-3s and even probiotics from things like fermented foods and yogurt and fish and seafood for the omega-3s and the iodine. Also, folate or vitamin B9 seems to always test pretty low on long-term carnivores, especially if they don't have variety in their diet. Now, if you're curious to learn how to do a carnivore diet and how to transition onto a carnivore diet, I will send you a free copy of my guide, the 30-day Carnivore Diet Challenge Guide, when you sign up to my newsletter at drsarahzaldivar.com/newsletter. The guide has over 160 pages. It has carnivore recipes, and it has a timetable for what to expect as you make that transition towards a carnivore diet. I highly also recommend checking out my latest guide, the 21-day Food Freedom Guide, because it goes over all of the critically important aspects of dealing with cravings. Because if you're transitioning towards a carnivore diet, then you're probably going to be hit by brain fog and cravings for the kinds of foods that you used to eat beforehand. And if you don't know what to expect, you might throw in the towel a little bit too prematurely. I highly recommend getting the 21-day Food Freedom Guide as part of the Cravings Bundle, because the Cravings Bundle is gonna give you 4 guides that are all focused on getting you to feel this food freedom and transition to a whole foods sober meal plan. You can find the Cravings Bundle at drsarahzaldivar.com/shop. And if you need personalized support with meal planning and nutrient optimization and weight loss, feel free to check out my coaching packages on drsarahzaldivar.com/coaching. And when you use code YouTube, you can get 50% off of the coaching packages. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this kind of content, make sure you give this YouTube video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.